Welcome to the Splash City Basketball Podcast. I am your host, Steve Hartman. This podcast, we are breaking down the Timberwolves season 2025-2026 season is in the books. Playoff opponent is known. We are heading to Denver, the Mile High City, to take on the Nuggets for the third time in the last four postseasons. First, we got to finish recapping what happened to this season. Was it a success? Was it a failure? Is it somewhere in between? How do you feel about the Timberwolves going into the playoffs? And I'm going to hand out my grades both on the season, but also to individual players as we look back at the 49-33 Timberwolves record. I know it's been a minute since we've done a podcast. March Madness ended. I was going fast and furious, needed a break, needed some time off, and took that time to just kind of chill, relax, and get ready for the Timberwolves playoff run here in Minnesota. And also, we started AAU basketball, so doing some coaching there, and the grind don't stop. We are back at it. We are one tournament in the books. Lots to learn from. Excited to continue coaching little guys basketball there. But on the Timberwolves front, we'll get a full look at the upcoming series against the Nuggets here in a couple days. But first, I want to give my recap of the season out. So let's get into it. All right. So like I said, Timberwolves finished the season 49-33, same record as last year. So when you think about that, they were a 6 seed last year. They take on the Lakers, who were more healthy last year than they are this year. Wolves take them out 4-1, take out the Wounded Warriors, and then get pretty much taken care of by the Thunder last season. This year, they get the Nuggets in the first round, which will be interesting. And again, we'll talk more about that later. But, when we look back at this Timberwolves era, right, and, 2 years ago, you had the Towns team, you had Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Towns gets traded. And of course, you bring in Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. So 2 years ago, 56-26. The last 2 years, 49-33. Of course, back-to-back runs to the Western Conference Finals. Are we plateauing? Is kind of the sense you get. I don't really necessarily look at it that way. The Wolves were pretty healthy throughout this season. They had a few games missed, but I think depending on whether you're looking at minutes or win potential, they were either second or third fewest in the league. And so they really didn't have to battle through injuries this year. They never really got in a groove, I would say. Last year, they kind of were scuffling and they hit that January, February run, and then they really turned a corner and went into the playoffs playing well. This year, can't really say that. They were a little banged up. Anthony Edwards took some time off. Jaden McDaniels was out for a few games. Nas has had the shoulder issue. So just from that standpoint, much different year compared to last year, I think, as you're entering the playoffs, even though the record was the same. When we did the NBA preview show way back in October, we were looking at over-unders, and the line set for the Wolves was 49.5. So if you paid attention to that, Vegas is pretty spot on. They come in slightly below at 49. But, whether or not they overachieved, underachieved, failure, success, that kind of thing, the Western Conference is just really good. You see that teams jumped up, the Spurs jumped up, Rockets fell back a little bit. I think the Nuggets are still the second best team in the West. And so you got, 4, 5, even like probably 6, including the Wolves, really quality teams in the Western Conference. And so that was, it's always going to be a slog to get in there. I think the goal the Timberwolves seem to have in mind is avoid the play-in, get that week off, and now come in ready to go. You hate to see kind of this like flip the switch type of approach, but the Wolves, to their credit, the last 2 postseasons have kind of turned it on when they needed to. There's some differences this year in that respect. There were some individuals that I think took a step back in terms of production. two of the main cogs from 2 years ago, Rudy and Mike, both looked older. Mike's significantly to the point where, almost unplayable in meaningful games. We'll get to him later. There's maybe some signs. Can he make some shots when he's in the game? That's the biggest thing with him at this point in his career. Um, but just overall, I don't know. My grade for the season is a C plus. I'm going C plus because I think the feeling was that you had going into the year, the players talked about it, the coaches talked about it, the continuity. They're running it back. They felt good about their group. They lose Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That was their main off-season departure. And you go into the season thinking like, hey, let's set the tone. Are we one of the elite teams? Are we in that conversation with the Thunder and the Nuggets and the Rockets and the Lakers? And by all accounts, they're not in that conversation right now. So they're a few games back of the Nuggets and the Rockets, quite a ways back from the Spurs and the Thunder, though. So they still, and the Thunder didn't have a lot of their players. I think they missed the fourth most games of all NBA teams, players missing games. So the fact that they did that and still ended up with their best record in the NBA is astonishing. But going back to the Wolves, C plus, it wasn't awful by any means. You're making the playoffs. You have a chance to make another run, albeit much tougher than last year. But I don't want to get to the point again like we were with the KG era of like getting to the playoffs isn't good enough, because we know what the other side of that coin feels like. Um, I think the bigger question is, how do we feel if we lose round one versus the Nuggets versus last year? So Western Conference Finals last year, but you played a Lakers team that wasn't equipped to beat you, and then a wounded Warriors team, no Steph Curry. That's not much of a series either. So they weren't even really tested until the Thunder series, and we saw how that went. But this year, I think losing to Denver would be no shame. I think Denver is one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NBA. They have home court. They have the best player in the world. And I think the Nuggets are deeper than they were last year. So I think this is going to be a tough series. I think the Wolves can win it. But do we go back to now? We went Western Conference Final 2 years in a row. We're out in the first round this year. Is it fire Finch? Is it blow it up? I mean, obviously there's going to be changes in the offseason, but I just don't think it's as simple as that, because the quality of opponent you're going to see in round one this year is as good as any you saw last year. Don't forget the Nuggets pushed that Thunder team to 7 games that we lost to in 5. So I think regardless of how this series goes, the season, this chemistry, the roster needs a little bit of a makeover, needs a little bit of an upgrade. And overall, it's a C plus for me. The defense slips again. They get down to 8th in defensive rating. Offensive rating is 10th, so they're top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. It's tough because you think of the Wolves 2 years ago and how dominant that team was defensively, and they just there's been 2 major changes. One, Karl Anthony Towns provided you ability to guard Jokic specifically, but you could guard some unique ways with Rudy and Towns together. Towns was huge in that playoff run against the Suns. He guarded KD. Nuggets, he guarded Jokic. That was huge. Nickeil Alexander-Walker being gone was a huge part of defensive rating, slipping a little bit. I do think Ayo, though not as good defensively as Nickeil, has a lot of similarities in his game. And I like the way he's pushing the pace on offense. So I do think there's, maybe a drop off there, but could be paying off on the offensive end a little bit as well. So otherwise, I think the other big drop off defensively is Anthony Edwards. I think 2 years ago, he was a better defender than he has been this year. Again, I think there's a little bit of, I don't want to call it sandbagging, but I think Ant got to the playoffs the last 2 years, and that was kind of the goal. And then you get to the playoffs and you have to grind through these series, and he didn't have much left in the tank. And whether it's right or wrong, I do think there's something to having some time off, getting healthy, and, maybe just pacing himself throughout the season. Are we going to see that full defensive effort? Can he just turn it on? Is he one of those guys? I don't know. I don't want to believe that that's really how it goes, because I don't. You think of the greats, you think of Michael Jordan, you think of Kobe, and there would be games where they didn't have it all game, but they would turn it on when they needed to. And defensively, they were so good that I just wonder if you can do that. I look at the Thunder and I see, no matter who's in the game, no matter November, March, playoffs, their defensive intensity is there. Um, it's not perfect all the time, but it's certainly better. And so, like, that championship pedigree, kind of, you either have it or you don't. And I'm starting to question the Timberwolves' ability to do that, to hit that, to have that focus that you need. Because yes, the season is long, it's 82 games, you can get complacent, but the playoffs are long too. That's 4 series, at least 20 some games, right? So you have to have focus and intensity for that entire period of time. Could you turn it on a game or two and turn it off? Yeah. But in the playoffs, you need to have it on. And so I think it's a bad habit of getting into that mode, is what I'm saying. All right, so let's talk about individual players, player grades. Let's start with Anthony Edwards, third in the league in scoring, shot 49% from the field, 40% from three, only played 61 games, but he was one of the best clutch players in the NBA this season, which was a big offseason focus for him. When it came time in the playoffs to get a bucket, end of a shot clock, end of a half, close game, what's your go-to move? What can you get to that you feel confident? He definitely had that this year. His offensive numbers were, I mean, they were great, right? Like, that was what we were like waiting for. Man, this guy is unbelievable. The problem is, as I talked about earlier, defensively, he slipped. Um, my hunch again is that he was sick of wearing down in the postseason. I'm not saying this injury isn't real. This is very real, but I do think there is a little bit of, I need to be at my best when it matters most. That is how NBA superstars are judged, is by the playoffs. Nobody will care if the Wolves were the 6th seed and 49-33 if they're in the NBA finals. So we'll see how Ant comes out. I give him a C plus. Um, Maybe that feels low. I think I had such high expectations. I think I was expecting this offensive performance with the same level of defensive intensity that we had seen from him 2-3 years ago, where he was one of the better on the ball defenders. He was one of the better point of attack defenders. He was game changing at times on the defensive end. The Nuggets series 2 years ago is an example of that. So I think that's what my expectations were, right or wrong. And I'd say again, offensively, great. Defensively, not great. So you get a C plus. Jaden McDaniels, kind of I don't know. He early in the year, I'd say even halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, it was just like, could he keep up that efficiency he had? He was, one of the leading 3-point shooters for much of the year. Tailed off at the end, fatigue, got injured. Not sure. Was it just a regression to the mean? He still ends the season shooting 51% from the field, 41% from three. I think we would all take that. About halfway through the year, I believe it was about 45%. So, Jaden, he's another one, though, that I feel like the defensive ability not ability, I shouldn't say that. His defensive prowess has slipped a little bit. I mean, the last 2 years, we talked about him as one of the most difficult wing defenders to play against. He's so long. He was guarding everybody from Luka to Jamal Murray, Devin Booker. And it didn't feel like he was quite as locked in defensively as he had been. So again, maybe that's just a little bit of teams kind of knowing how to combat his length on the perimeter. But overall, his drop off defensively certainly isn't where Ants has been, and his offensive improvement is also very impressive. So I give Jaden a B for the season. Um, I guess just because he's not in that superstar conversation, the expectations aren't as high. So the fact that he shot over 40% from three to me is really impressive, and he's still out there guarding the top perimeter players for the opposing teams. Um, Former starter, let's go to Mike Conley. Um, Obviously the midseason trade, he gets picked up off waivers. Does he have anything left in the tank to give the Wolves? Everybody loves him. We don't have to go through that. Um, the encouraging sign to me, very small sample size, but in his final 4 games of the year, he averaged over 10 points a game and shot 12 for 21 from three. I think at this point in his career, that's all the Wolves are hoping for, and that's all fans should really hope for. Can he make the open threes? If you put him in the corner, can he knock down a shot? Can he hold his own defensively without just absolutely getting cooked and shredded? If he can make open threes, then he becomes a guy you could bring him in off the bench for spacing purposes. So we'll see if that's real, if that's something, if he's rested enough and he has a little juice for the playoffs. Overall, I mean, listen, Father Time comes for all of us. So it's hard to give Mike Conley much lower than a C. I think sometimes it's shocking to see how quickly it does go for athletes, not just basketball players, NFL players. I mean, when it's time, and it's stark. So um, he's still obviously on the team because of leadership, because of his wisdom about the game, which can be valuable. You just love to see him contribute, maybe knock down a couple threes on Saturday. Julius Randle. Um, I looked at his stats. They aren't that far off from last year. But again, I feel like recency bias and like watching him just play phenomenal in the playoffs against the Lakers and the Warriors. Again, not great opponents last year. But he was able to shoot the three ball. He was, bully balling guys. So this year he's sitting at 31.5% from three, which is really probably the biggest downside from his game this year. But also, this is the fewest rebounds he's had in his career in a season. He only missed 3 games. The Wolves obviously need him if they want to do anything in the playoffs. He's got an interesting matchup in the Nuggets series. And again, looking at the totality of the year, not much different than last year in terms of production and statistics. But where I think the narrative changed on him last year was in the playoffs. And so can that happen again this year? Sure. There were moments later in the year where it looked like he was starting to get his stroke back and finally kind of get into a rhythm. Um, so we'll see what Julius can bring. Again, he's getting a little bit older, getting some days off here. Will be really good. They avoided the play-in, which they had to do just to basically for health purposes. But I give Julius a C grade for the year. Again, nothing flashed. It wasn't anything better. He kind of is, I think, what he is at this point in his career. We'll see what he brings into the playoffs. Dante DiVincenzo, one of the few guys I actually give a B or better to. Dante got a B from me this year. He, again, his role is what it is. I mean, he is going to get after you defensively. He's going to pressure the ball. He rebounds well for a guard. He, when he's in rhythm, he's a good shooter. When he's forced to take the grenades and rushing his shot and things like that, it obviously doesn't look great, and he doesn't provide a whole lot offensively other than that. but I give him a B because I think, Dante does what we expect him to do. He's reliable. There's not ups and downs to his defensive intensity. There's not really ups and downs to his offensive game, other than, when you're a volume 3-point shooter, you might have games where you go 2 for 10, and then you might have games where you go 6 for 8. And that's kind of what, if we're judging Dante on strictly 3-point shooting, I think he's solid. I think he does what we expect him to do. Rudy Gobert, I give a C grade too. Same with Mike, like age, I think is starting to catch up with him. The rim protection isn't as intense. It isn't as formidable as it once was. This could be, um, and I'm not obviously Rudy doesn't listen to this podcast, but I'm not gonna say this is a career defining series for Rudy. But if you wanted a little to rub a little bit of stuff in some national pundits' faces, Shaq and many Draymond Green and many others, this would be the series to do it, right? I know people think that Joker cooks Rudy, and he does, but he cooks everybody. Um, this would be a game that if Rudy can show up and really just make life difficult for Joker, that would probably be kind of a nice bookend to his dominant defensive career. Because let's be honest, with Wemby, Defensive Player of the Year awards are probably done for Rudy. And he's not winning much else in terms of any offensive awards. So this playoff series, I think, is really interesting for Rudy's career. Uh, just as you look at what he's done, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's been the anchor for the Wolves in these last 3 playoff runs. So much communication and rotation and effort and professionalism defensively was credited to Rudy. So I think this series is interesting for him. Would I be shocked if Joker scores 40 in 3 games? No. Would I put that all on Rudy? And probably not. But if he can do some damage here, just make life difficult for Joker, that's a win, and I think would really um, look good on his all-time resume, which is one of the best defensive players in the last how many years. So Bones Highland. Bones, I got a B plus for Bones, man. I love me some Bones. I think he's what the team Wolves fans maybe have always thought Jalen Noel was gonna do, right? Like there was guys throughout the years that we thought were gonna be that juice off that bench. Could get you 20 on a given night if he got hot. Provides a little flair, a little excitement, and Bones fits all of that. Um, Inconsistent, but he's a bench player, so I'm not gonna worry too much about that. Um, if you get an A, you're probably 6th man of the year territory, which he's not. But I think Bones did exactly what we hoped he would do, provided exactly what this team needs. Um, Naz Reid, another bench guy. I'm gonna give him a B. I know there was some ups and downs, but considering how the season started with Naz losing his sister in the fall, going through that mental hurdle and difficulty and mourning, and then the shoulder injury at the end of the year. Again, he had pretty similar numbers to last year and the year before. Actually, his rebounding numbers this year are a little bit higher. So, I think Nas is what Nas is, and like he does that role. He makes his shots. He's again going to be a really important player in this Nuggets series. He's had moments where he defended Joker okay, and so we'll see how that comes out in the playoff series. But overall, I don't know how you can be too upset with Nas. I think Nas has had a solid year. Is it 6th man of the year award? Probably not. That gets you an A, but for me, a B grade is where I see Nas. Other guys here, I got Ayo Dosunmu. I'll talk about in a minute. I mean, he was brought in halfway through the year, right? Trade deadline. So I'll get to all right, let's talk about Ayo Dosunmu. Comes in, trade deadline, Wolves gave up Rob Dillingham and Leonard Miller and some second rounders. Immediate impact. Like I have really been a big fan of his since he came into the Wolves group. I think he provides, again, like Bones, some pace and some intensity. I've seen more outlet passes from Rudy to Ayo pushing the ball, and I think that's great for the Wolves because we've seen them get bogged down offensively. So when you can get easy buckets in transition, that's huge. Is he a permanent piece of the Wolves? That's a big off-season question we'll talk about. He's only making $7.5 million this year. That's his final year of his contract. So if the Wolves don't re-sign him and we get a couple months of Ayo Dosunmu, I don't know that that's gonna feel great, but his salary is gonna likely at least triple um, in the offseason. So can they afford another $20 to $25 million player? We'll see. But again, I would love to see him back. I know there's a lot of comparisons with Nah. If he's that similar player, he's not obviously not quite as good defensively. And Nah now getting big time minutes with the Hawks is going to probably be the most improved player award winner. So I won't go that far, but I think Io does almost as good a job defensively. I think he's one of the best perimeter defenders on the team. He can make some threes. He's shooting 40% plus from three. And he gets to the rim. He attacks. He's fast. He's like a point guard version of Terrence Shannon. So I got a B plus for Ayo Dosunmu. SlowMo again brought him back as well. Veteran IQ, stabilize that second unit a little bit. I kind of like again, I talked about this a couple weeks back, but a little more roster flexibility for the Wolves in the playoffs. So they can go a little bit bigger with Kyle at the 3. They can play small with Kyle at the 5 or 4, of course. And he can kind of guard multiple positions. He could be one of the defensive keys in this series against the Nuggets. So I like Kyle. I like what he brings to the table. I think he's just a winning player in general. I got a B minus for him. And then incompletes for Terrence Shannon, injured. Jalen Clark didn't play a lot. Joan Berenger, I love the future, the potential. Shown some flashes at times. Keep him out of foul trouble. Have him pick and choose in moments where he's blocking shots. I think he'll be great. Maybe, he's 19 right now. Maybe in 2 years, we're talking about him starting center for the Timberwolves. But just incomplete grades from me on those 3 because just didn't see enough of them this year. All right, so for the third time in 4 years, the Wolves are matching up with the Nuggets in the playoffs. So this is going to have a little bit different vibe because last time there was no Towns, or there was Towns, there was no Dante, there was no Julius. The Nuggets have a much different team than they had a couple years ago. They have more shooting around Joker. In that 7-game series, if you remember, Rudy was guarding Aaron Gordon because Aaron Gordon wasn't a great shooter. I think he was shooting like 29-30% that season. Now he's up to being a pretty competent shooter. So the days of leaving Aaron Gordon alone in the corner are probably gone. So just kind of a different vibe, different look. Really want to get into this series more later in the week with some guests, and we'll talk about Nuggets, Wolves, round 3 in the last 4 years. But obviously for the Wolves, health is a big part of it. Same with the Nuggets. But as long as Jokic is healthy, I think, him and Murray make that team go. You can kind of put whoever around them. Elite role players gets them to the conference finals, maybe the NBA finals. Average role players gets them in the playoffs to maybe second round. And so the key with the Wolves is Anthony Edwards' health, I think. The Nuggets don't really have anybody that can slow him down, and they don't have any rim protectors, which is always what has bothered Ant. When you think about the Thunder, right? Big rim protectors. A couple years ago against the Mavericks, they had Gafford and they had Lively rim protectors. And so Denver doesn't have that. Ant gets kind of a free run to the rim if he can get past that first line of defense. So it'll be key. Like if Ant is healthy and himself and willing to play defense, Wolves have a real shot. If he's less than healthy, if he's less than 90%, and not engaged defensively, they're going to have a real problem because Denver is one of the best offensive teams in the NBA, probably the best offensive player team. Jokic and Murray are two of the most efficient offensive players. So if it's a shootout, the Wolves are going to be, it's going to be tough, no doubt. So lots more to talk about there. Tip-off Saturday, April 18th at 2:30 at Ball Arena in Denver. During the regular season, it's like wins and we get hung up on, oh, this bad loss, that, but all of it comes down to the playoffs. We got back-to-back Western Conference Finals appearances. Last year's was, I would say, pretty soft Western Conference Finals appearance. Not much to go through last year, but this year is going to be a real challenge for the Timberwolves or anybody else, to be honest. There's some really, really tough, physical, talented teams in the top 4 or 5 teams in the West, and then the Timberwolves at 6, who are also very capable. So we'll see which Timberwolves team shows up. Again, not ready to declare failure if we lose to the Nuggets. Not ready to declare finals or bust if we beat the Nuggets, but it's just about the journey. It's about the ride. The whole season is that way. And then you get to the playoffs and it's the same thing. You got to just enjoy it. And should be a great, great series. I know a lot of fans, a lot of media, and a lot of writers have kind of said this is the series in the first round. We'll see if that holds true. I expect nothing less than 6 or 7 games to go between the Wolves and the Nuggets. All right, so that's the show. Talking Wolves, recap on the season, giving out my grades for the Wolves and the players as we enter NBA playoff action starting this week. We got play-in games followed by first round Timberwolves and Nuggets on Saturday. I haven't seen a lot of action on the Gophers side in terms of transfer portal. Robert Vaihola and BJ Omat did enter their names in the transfer portal, so they'll likely be gone. But the 4 main guys who could stay did. Bobby Durkin, Isaac Asama, Grayson Grove, and Jalen Crocker-Johnson, all expected back in Dinkytown. But no major additions yet, so we'll keep an eye on that. Some big names in the portal, but it's just the way of college basketball nowadays. And so that's a show. Again, thank you all for listening. If you do have time, please like and subscribe. Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen. Appreciate you listening. As always, this has been the Splash City Basketball Podcast.
Back in that bag again.